All right, so we're just building up the sheath now, getting to the final parts. We've got a die, we've got the strap there, we've got the sewed in so it's not moving around on us at all. Got the snap in, and then I've already got part of it attached. So these little thin additional strips of leather on the edges here, this is called the welt. And so the idea is that it's gonna make the leather a little thicker there. So the knife is gonna sit right in there nicely. So we should see it when it's sheathed, it's gonna be like this. But the most important thing about the welt is when we stitch this thing together, now what it's gonna do is the stitching is going to be through here. And that way, when the blade comes into contact, it can't get to the stitches, right? So we'll never cut the stitches when you're sheathing your knife over and over and over again. Got a little bit of a gap around here just in case anything gets in there. The knife will still fit nice and tight in there. So I've got a lot of contact cement on there. So the contact cement will just help glue it all up. I've got both of them in place here, and so we're just going to contact cement it, and then we're going to go ahead and start in with our stitching. So let's go ahead and see if we can line these things up, because with the contact cement, once you stick it, it's stuck. So let's see if we can get that thing lined up the way we want it. So looking pretty good there, across the top. Let's just keep on. That's looking good. Now we're gonna just come in and stick the bottom here. So the bottom doesn't line up perfectly, but it will. So once we get this thing all stuck, we're gonna put it on there, and the leather actually acts a lot like wood. So all of this unevenness that we see in here, we're gonna put it on the sander, and we're just gonna sand it smooth. We're gonna just even it all out so that it's not like this. So it's really hard when you're cutting the leather to keep it perfect and even, but you just got to get it pretty close. And so now, because of the welt, we've got a nice little opening for the knife, and then of course we can't cut those seams once we sew it. So this should, yep, it's gonna fit nice. I'm not gonna stuff it home there until we get some stitches in it though. Cool. So we can see that we're getting there. It's looking a lot more even at this point. Just cleaning up a few more spots. Looking good. Okay, so now I have it all glued up. We're all sanded, so we're nice and smooth through here, nice and even. And we'll go back and we'll hit this with a little bit more leather dye just to clean it all up. But first what I did next was I beveled the edges So I used this little edge beveler here. And then this is a groove tool. And basically I set it so that it's in the middle of the welt there, and I ran it all the way around, and it just grooves out the leather a little bit so that your stitching will sit down inside of it a little bit. And I'm actually really digging the two-tone look here, but the stitching's going to cover that up. But I'm going to probably hit it with some dye anyway, just so that it all matches, and then we'll throw some black stitching on there. But in order to get the stitching in now, I can't push the needles through all that leather. I'm going to hand stitch it. So what I did is I just took a little piece of scrap metal that I have, and I went ahead and I just put a couple notches in it. And so now that I've got the groove here, you can see where I've sort of begun. I just set it in, hammer it, and then I can skip over, hammer it, skip over, and so this way I get an outline for where I want every stitch to be. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. We just set her in there, and they actually sell a tool like this. It's probably better. It's got, I think, more teeth in it, but hard to beat free. And it works just fine. Just takes another minute or two, but you can see we're going to get a nice even spacing that way. All right, so you can see we've got everything stamped all the way around. And so now in every one of those little indents that I hammered, I'm gonna go ahead and drill a hole. So it takes a little while, so I won't video all of it, but basically you just want to try and keep it as flat as possible on the piece of wood as you can, because you want to try and keep the spacing, so the depth of the stitches here, when we flip it over, we want to see the depth of it there. But it's kind of hard to do, so I ran a groove on the visible side, but this is the side that'll sit against your leg. I didn't put a groove in there just in case I miss. It would be really obvious if it wasn't in the groove. So let's go ahead and get to it. Let's move this camera. Fat hands are in the way. So the bit will actually load up. This stuff's like more dense than wood. It doesn't just like flip out of there. Sometimes it gets stuck in there, but you can see we're keeping a pretty even drilling here. This is a lot easier because the sheath is so flat. Anyway, you get the idea. So we'll just continue all the way around. All right, so I went ahead and after I got all the holes drilled, I went ahead and just put a little bit of dye on it just to help it all blend together. And now for the toughest part, in my opinion. So I've got some black thread here. And the toughest part for me is always trying to get enough thread to make it through. This is a huge leather sheath compared to what other ones I've made. And so it's so hard to figure out how much you need because you have to go in and out, in and out, in and out. So I'm just gonna grab a whole bunch here. So that'd be like maybe, let's just go nuts with it. Because you don't want to run out in the middle and have a couple of seams there. Let me see. Let's try it. So what we're gonna do is a saddle stitch. This is what they call it. So we're gonna get the thread and needle. I don't need these gloves on. I was just putting a little more dye on it. The gloves are here. So the way that this works is we use the old saddle stitch. So we go through the hole one way, and then we're gonna try and find the middle of this string. I've got so much string here, so let's trying to find the middle of the string right now, so I think we're looking good. Okay, so once we got it through there, now we're just gonna go through the next hole. And then we go back through that hole with it. So this one's usually tight. So this one I usually got to pull with the pliers on the way back through. And there's one. One of a bajillion, right? And basically, we're just gonna keep going with that, but you don't need to watch all that. Just finishing up the last stitches here now. Looks really good. Super happy with this one. Through here, so we got the one last hole, and then what we're going to do is just to make sure it stays nice and tight, we're going to back stitch it, and then we're going to cut it off on the back side. So we don't want to have that hanging out on the visible side there. So we just go back one, hard to see. Right there. These backwards ones are always tough. A lot of thread in there. It's this isn't regular thread, it's a waxed thread is what you want. There we go. Let's see if we can. Looks pretty good there. Looks pretty good. And then so what we do is we'll just cut it off back here. And basically we just have a couple of little strings hanging off of it. So we'll just flame it because it's a waxed thread. It starts to melt, and then we just squash them down. There we go. That holds. I mean, I've made sheaths like this, done the same thing. I mean, some of these sheaths that I've done in the past, I mean, these things are old, and like this one I use every day. This is like my bench knife that I made a long time ago, and it holds up. So we're taking a look here. Looks pretty good. So now what we want to do is just to kind of give it that finished look, you want to burnish the edges. So to burnish the edges, there's a couple of different things that you could use. You could just use any stick. But the guys down at the leather shop, when I went and talked to them, you could use water. You get it wet, and then you basically use like a slicker or whatever they call it. I don't know, burnisher, and you just start rubbing the edge, and it's gonna polish it and it'll smooth things out. But the beeswax works really nice too. It kind of fills it in and gives it a nice shine. So we'll do this on all these edges. It helps seal it up real nice too. So just scrubbing some of it on there. So then once I get that on, then you just take your slicker, your burnisher here, and you start rubbing it. We're going to do this to all the edges, but these edges out in here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put some sealant on the leather, and it'll help give it a little bit of gloss. And it'll protect it a little bit. It's this super sheen stuff. There's a lot of different things that people use, but I like that stuff. It's super easy. has really quick dry time. Good here. Let me. My brush is too big to fit. Oh, maybe I can get some of it in there. I don't really have a tray here somewhere. There we go. There was a little bit of I used this brush for the dye. I'm getting all colored up, and I was so good about wearing the gloves for most of this time too. Oh well. How it always is with gloves. You wear them like the entire time, and then you just get impatient right at the end. You don't put them back on, and then you're all colored up anyway. I'm gonna have to put some gloves on. This is ridiculous. I'm looking like a mess. Well, there it is. We got her all stained up, all stitched up. Went ahead and put a little bit of that sealant on there and did my best to hand rub it in. Looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the stitching. I think it's nice and even. Came out good. So we'll go ahead and put it into the sheath. And so we just got to kind of be careful we don't stab right in here. We just get that tip in there, and it should drive it home. And we can go ahead and snap her. There it is. Nice big belt loop for you there. That's awesome. Looks good. Hope you like it.